And I'll make sure the slides are able to be shared here. PowerPoint. Okay, can you all see my full screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. The way PowerPoint works, it's totally covering you all up now. I cannot even see you, but I'll be sure and pause so we can see one another and chat throughout this. So welcome to Read, Write, Move Routines in Secondary ELA to do with movement. I'm Jason Stevenson, the Program Manager of Secondary Education. This presentation initially started because we had a summer academy called Standards on the Move earlier this summer, and my colleague Dr. Shannon Klassen asked me to present something on adding movement at the secondary ELA level. I said I'd be glad to. If you'll ever need to reach out to me, there's my phone number, there's my email address, and I will share these slides with you at the end of our time together today. And you probably signed up for this webinar because you read the description and are hoping to get some information regarding this information, and we'll definitely deliver that today. Our learning objectives are to determine what qualifies as movement, to identify movement strategies for the English language arts setting, and to practice incorporating some movement into an ELA lesson that we already have. This presentation is grounded in the OK-MTSS framework within the facet of evidence-based decisions, Tier 1 universal school-wide supports, focusing on academics in core curriculum with standards for rigor. Now, if we were in person, it's hard to approximate that on a Zoom call. I'd have you get up and move and take a sticky note and place yourself in one of these four quadrants. So our x-axis on this Cartesian plane on the far left is I use little movement in my classroom. On the far right is I use lots of movement in my classroom. And then the y-axis at the bottom is I know few movement activities. And the top one is I know many movement activities. Now I'm going to take a chance here and use my annotate pen, and let's maybe use a green color here. Could either one of you participants today tell me where I should mark your place on this quadrant? Where would you place yourself now?
I would say that I use little movement in my classroom.
Uh-huh.
I don't know a lot of movement techniques, and then also I worry about behaviors when I let my kids move too much.
I understand that too, because I once taught middle school as well. So maybe somewhere in this quadrant based on that.
Yes.
Okay, another response. I'll use a
Yeah,
different.
I'm pretty much the same, kind of in that same little to few
Okay,
movements.
got it. Are you
Yeah.
seeing the little dots I made?
Yes.
I didn't mean to choose wicked colors, but I did. So you all are the perfect audience maybe for this presentation today. So we need to just keep going. Same reason as was it Jennifer or Lindsay who shared first? I can't see faces right now.
It was me, Jennifer.
Okay. Who went first? So Lindsay, same reason for placing yourself in that quadrant, do you think?
I would just say, I guess I don't know a lot of movements that could be used in the classroom, so just lack of knowledge. But yeah,
Sure.
I mean, you get them out of their seat and then you got to keep them focused. So I guess movements that allow the students to stay focused. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. All right, we'll move along here. If it'll let me. Whoa. Okay. Moving on. So we've already talked, and I need to clear the annotations now, so forgive me. All right, there we are. So we've reflected already about how people voted, so let's just keep going. So maybe something to know is that the part of the brain that lights up when a child moves is the same part of the brain that lights up when they read or work on math. So they're connected, and also having a little bit of physical activity does help activate the brain. So if a seventh grade student is staying seated for an entire class period, they're missing out a little bit. So whenever we can take in information in multiple modes, be it seeing the information, hearing it, but also moving with it can help lock it in. And so incorporating movement in various ways can be helpful for students. So there's three types of movement, and I was in a couple trainings this summer for this workshop to make sure I understood a little bit more about movement. One of them would be a brain boost, and a brain boost, sometimes called a brain break, is just allowing students that time to get up out of their desks, move around the room, shake out those stiff arms or legs. Also, they could, move arms while they're staying seated, and they're still getting a tiny bit of movement that way. But giving your brain a break, a pause, to do just a little bit of movement can actually help with learning later on. And you can do this strategically. You wouldn't have to do it 5 times during a lesson, but maybe halfway through or at 2 different points in the lesson. You're strategic about just giving students a chance to move a little bit, and that can boost their brain power for the learning that you're wanting to do with your students later on that class period. And then there's facilitation of learning. This type of learning or this type of movement actually is necessary in order to lock in whatever it is that they're learning. I'm going to give maybe a poor example, but it's all I can think of right now. If you were like teaching handwriting to your students, cursive, and you were showing them how to make the letter in the air, here's the cursive S or the capital Q that looks kind of like a 2. Doing the movement with a finger would be facilitation of learning. So the third type of movement is what's most common in an English language arts course, and that would be movement to learn. And movement to learn is layering on movement on top of the actual English language arts work. If students are getting up and moving to one of 4 corners in your classroom to discuss 4 different decisions, opinions on a prompt that you've given on the screen, they could do that while seated, but they're moving to learn so that they can get up and move around the room a little bit, but then they're also having that rich dialogue and discussion using their listening and speaking skills with their classmates. So it's not required, but it's kind of layered on or helpful. Some tips for adding movement: don't overdo it. You don't have to make your entire class all day long move around. You can also ask for input from your students, asking them what type of movement feels good to you, like what would you like to see in class. And then you also know what works well in 3rd hour may not work well with 5th hour. So just being mindful of that and spreading movement throughout your lessons and throughout your units. So that's just kind of an overview, a quick little orientation to movement. And maybe you're using movement a little bit more than you realized. And movement doesn't even necessarily have to be something extremely strenuous, but just any sort of getting up, moving around could count toward that. Having heard all that, do either one of you have thoughts on, oh, maybe I do use a little bit more movement than I realized? Or are we still kind of thinking I want to add more, or I don't do it a whole lot? And
I
I think
use gallery walk quite a bit in my classroom, but that's kind of the extent of it. So I'd
Yeah.
like to add more.
When you do your gallery walk, do you have enough room to do that inside your classroom, or is it out in the hallway?
I've done both. I actually have a pretty large classroom, so I'm pretty blessed.
Good. Okay. Yeah, we are going to talk about gallery walks briefly. Lindsay, any movement activities? I already at least do this.
Yes, I probably do a little bit more than I thought about, but then of course there's always more that I need to be doing. I was thinking, do the brain breaks in between different parts of my lessons would be good. And I kind of forgot about four corners. I haven't done that in a while, but that would be good to bring back into my classroom.
Yeah. Okay, great. I have even more ideas, so hopefully I can prompt you all with a few more. Okay. Share. Okay, are you all seeing my full screen rearrange the desks?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, I mean, the way that your classroom is set up might determine the types of movement that are easier or more difficult to do. When students came into my room and saw that desks were in rows, that was typically a sign to my sophomore students that there was going to be a quiz or a test today, because usually I did have the desks set up in groups of 4 or quads, because I like them to collaborate and talk with one another about what we were reading and writing. But just moving the desks in a certain way is going to facilitate more or less movement. And you, as a teacher, you don't have to get to school early or stay late to get the desk moved. Have the first or last hour of the day students help you get that room set up. It may even be that you want one gigantic circle or an inner and outer circle of desks moved around. So that's just a tiny, tiny food for thought. But let's talk about a very traditional activity in the English language arts class, which is just having students turn and talk about something that they've read, or maybe an image that they've seen, or a comic strip, whatever. So in a traditional turn and talk, the teacher poses a question. If you're wanting to encourage some writing and giving students a chance to rehearse their thinking, you probably want your students to write a response in their notebook or on some notebook paper. Give them 2 or 3 minutes to respond to whatever question or prompt that you have. And then traditionally, you would just have students turn to a classmate for a quick discussion about the text or the topic at hand, and they can use their written response as needed to help guide their discussion. But when you do that, there's not much movement at all. So to add movement to the traditional turn and talk, teachers could do at least one of 3 things. One of them is same color, where students are to get up out of their desks and find a partner who is wearing the same color that they are wearing and share. So maybe it's a shoe or it's a shirt or pants, whatever, but they find someone who has one of the same colors they are wearing, and then that's who they share with. That sounds more like a scavenger hunt to me, but maybe your students would like that. Another option is wallflowers. Students may not know what a wallflower is. You could explain that to them if you wanted to. But in this case, students move to 2 sides of the classroom. One wall is the wallflowers. You could even have that labeled if you wanted to. So they have to stay put. And then the other side of the class, they are the ones who choose a partner from the wallflowers for discussion. So one side stays put, and then the others come and find a partner. And then the third option is a discussion train. In this case, the students are still divided in half, but they form 2 rows that face one another. And whoever they are facing across from at the beginning, that's who their partner is. And they discuss their response, whatever that may be. And then after just a few minutes, one row shifts down by one person, all in the same direction. The other row does stay put. So now they have a new discussion partner. And this would work well even with an odd numbered class. And if you wanted to add more spice of variety, if you've got a large amount of students, you're not going to be able to get through everyone having the same partner. But instead of saying, okay, we're all shifting down by one, you could say, we're going to shift down 2 people this time, or 3. So everyone's getting a variety of discussion partners, a variety of perspectives, and you can get all of this done in like 10 minutes if you wanted to. So those are the 3 options of same color, wallflowers, or discussion train. We can't really practice this in person because it's a webinar, but we will still engage in a little discussion after I reveal a short poem in one moment. We'll read it aloud and then we'll discuss. But if we were in person, is there a preference, Lindsay and Jennifer, that you all would have for those 3 Or do you think like your students would gravitate toward one of these three more than the others? What are your thoughts? Same color, wallflowers, and discussion train.
I like the discussion train. I feel like that'd be one that I would like to try out and see how that works.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree with Lindsay. That one has interested me too.
Mm-hmm.
And so at Inspire OK earlier this summer, when I gave this presentation, that is what the overwhelming majority of the room wanted to do. We were in such a cramped room and there were lots of chairs, but we made it work and we practiced doing a discussion train in person. With this poem by Naomi Shiabnai, it appeared in her 2019 poetry collection, The Tiny Journalist, which is set in the Middle East. And the poem is called No Explosions. To enjoy fireworks, you would have to have lived a different kind of life. And that's the whole poem. So imagine a rowdy room of middle school students or high school students or teachers all facing one another in two lines and having them discuss this poem. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Etc., etc. So we may just do a generic conversation now since we can't do movement. So any thoughts, comments, questions about this very brief but powerful poem?
I think that my students would definitely start talking about PTSD and those types of things would definitely come up in their conversations.
Absolutely. Do you feel like you have a lot of students in your population with connections to military, or is it just from their watching TV shows or movies they know about PTSD?
I would say a little of both.
Okay, cool. I gave this presentation at that Standards on the Move conference. And when we did this exercise, there were teachers in the room who weren't English teachers. They taught PE, they taught Spanish. And one of the comments from one of those teachers, I believe, was, I didn't know a poem could be like this. Like, I didn't know a poem could be so short. So that's kind of interesting to hear. The reason I picked this poem is because it is so short. It packs a punch. And it did go viral on Twitter a couple of years back. And sure enough, around the 4th of July, not too long ago, Independence Day, people were sharing this poem online again in kind of conjunction with that. So you all are going to try doing discussion train in your classroom. Are there any questions you have about how that might work or what you might need to do to tweak that in your classes? Or do you think it would work as is, the discussion train?
So
I think it would.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it would work as is, but I'd have to tweak it per class or maybe kind of pick where they're standing or which side they're on, maybe have to help them pick a spot for them. But I don't know, I just have to see how it goes and how it's different for each class.
Okay. And Jennifer?
how would you do this when you want the kids to like move down if there's a blank spot or anything? Do you just kind of like adjust kids and hey, okay, you're now scoot here, or how would you do that?
Yeah, and I was thinking now too, the whole odd numbered class, there would be one group that would have to be a group of three instead of a pair. And so whenever someone gets to the end of the line, if they're moving down, if they get to the very end of the line, they have to go back to the beginning in order to make it work. And then use the teacher. At the end, the discussion train yourself if you want it to be an even number and you have an odd number of students that day because two of them had orthodontics appointed, ortho appointments, and someone else is sick, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'd be in there to be the odd person.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I hadn't thought about the moving back to the beginning. Thank you.
Yeah, once you get to the end of the line, then they'll have to go back. Another thing that will happen probably only the first time, you might have classmates who are good friends and they're going to want to stand by each other. And you could be
Mhm.
like, that's great because your partner is actually across from you.
Mm.
Anyway, that'd be funny to see that play out. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. We'll move on. Okay, this activity would be tied to our Oklahoma academic standards. I grabbed some high school ones. There are middle school equivalent objectives that are about students having collaborative discussions about what they're reading and analyzing components of different genres. So this is a standards-based activity. If your principal happened to pop in during a discussion train day and had questions about what are you doing? Okay, next up is what I'm calling the acted out section of movement. Lindsay and Jennifer, do you all have a drama unit that you have in your curriculum each year where students are reading a play?
I do Romeo and Juliet and
Yep.
some excerpts from Macbeth.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm the writing and grammar teacher, so I don't necessarily do the reading part of it.
Got it. Okay. So I'm sorry, Lindsay, this is maybe can be a little bit more relevant to Jennifer, but you can tell your colleague who does,
Okay, that's
they
okay. Yeah.
probably read the Diary of Anne Frank play or some sort of play. It's typically in the textbook. So to kind of frame a drama unit, one thing to do would be you as the teacher pass out a single line of dialogue to each student. The lines of dialogue could come from the current play that the unit is all about, or maybe they come from future plays. I actually made a packet of these dialogue lines that you all can download today or print off later that come from a variety of Shakespeare plays. So every student gets one piece of dialogue on a little card, and then students pair up. You can choose the partners, or you can let students decide who they want to partner up with. And then they produce a mini play. The way to do that is they have to decide, looking at both their pieces of dialogue, who would say their dialogue first and who would be the response. They also have to decide how they want to say their line, how to deliver it. Should their tone of voice be hopeful or angry, serious, and so on? And then here's the movement piece, because not only will they be standing up in front of the class to do their mini play, but if their line calls for some sort of movement with their hands, and I'm a hand talker, so it comes naturally to me, they should add in movement. Is there an accusatory point, or are their hands up in protest or fear? So then each student pair performs their lines of mini dialogue, and then you can have students reflect on and write about their choices in creating this mini play. A modified version of this, and Jennifer, maybe you do this already. There are Shakespearean insults and compliments floating around online where students have 3 columns of words and they pick 2 different adjectives and then a noun, and it's all Shakespearean language. And so students could insult one another with these handouts or compliment each other with these handouts, and that can be kind of fun. However, I did not feel comfortable in my role here at the state agency supplying those, because there are some rather crass words on those Shakespearean insults, so I did not want to do that. The dialogue cards that I have created for you all are a set of 40 different lines. So in a class of 30, you'd only have to use some of these. And students, maybe if they want to swap out because they don't like the line that they got, you could have some extras. So you could do this with many scenes that I just described. You could also do a tone remix. And tone remix is you give students one line in a group of 3 or 4, and all 4 of them have to say the line with a different tone. And so that would be a way to either introduce or review the meaning of tone and English language arts. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then immediately share it again so I can show you where to find these on the ELA framework website. are you all familiar with the ELA framework website?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Yes.
Jennifer. Yay. Okay, all-star pupils today. Here's my Firefox browser. When you get to the homepage of the ELA framework, there are quick links at the bottom section that have all these colorful icons. You want the second one that looks like a vault, and the Professional Learning Vault has all of our past presentations and handouts. And you're going to want to look for the secondary section. This presentation was at Inspire OK and Standards on the Move. So it's on there twice. So Read, Write, Move, the very first one says that you can get access to the slideshow, which that's where you can get the slides for today's presentation. And then the Shakespeare dialogue cards are next. The activity that I just described, mini scenes, and the tone remix activity are for you there. And then what follows are all these different lines of dialogue from past Shakespeare plays that you would cut out and then students could use. So there's that. And now I need to share my screen again for the slides. Let's share the whole thing. All right, so here's one other activity. This is a 60-second play, and I learned about this from the Folger Shakespeare Institute. They did an in-person training in Oklahoma City at this point, probably 20 years ago. But they had an example of this for us, I think with Macbeth, maybe Hamlet. But the goal was for the teacher to reduce the play to its most essential lines of dialogue. And once that one pager of a play was created, the lines of dialogue were listed only as actor 1, actor 2, actor 3. The character names were removed. And then you find volunteers from your class to read those different parts. And they read them in front of the class, like in a row. And so as they read their lines, you task them with adding movement when appropriate. Because of Shakespeare plays, a lot of characters die in his tragedies. So if there was a character death in one of the lines, the student could fall down in a safe way where they don't hurt themselves. But then the students in the audience who are not participating, who are watching, they, at the conclusion of the play, identify the character that each student was portraying. And so that way they're staying engaged and keeping track of those important lines of dialogue. And then you as the teacher could time their performance. If the goal was to get it under 60 seconds, did they meet their goal? And if there were 8 students who participated in acting out, they could take their seats. And then a new group of 8 other students could come forward and try to beat the time of the first group. So if you've got students who are super competitive, that would work in your context. So if we were in person today, do y'all feel like the face-off and making a mini scene would be more appealing, or do you like this idea of a 60-second play if we had enough people to pull it off? Or what do you think would work in your class?
I feel like I could use any of these in my class.
Okay.
I have 9 through 12, and we are very dramatic, so they would absolutely love this.
All right. Excellent. And now you know where to get that resource. I'm trying to think, Lindsay, how this might be different in a writing class. I'm going to keep thinking and I'll circle back at the end. Do you have any initial reactions or thoughts on adapting it to a composition setting?
Well, I mean, I could just take something that they're reading in their class, in the other class, their reading class, and then we could write our own, one page of what it was, or,
Okay.
even do the characters. I mean, I could just take what they're reading in their other class and do the writing part of it.
Okay. Excellent. All right. I'm going to share again. We'll continue on with our slides. Ooh. Go share. And this activity would be connected to, again, identifying characteristics of genres, specifically drama, and then also analyzing for theme, mood, and tone, especially tone in this particular one. All right, so the next category of movements we'll discuss are chatting and moving at the same time. And I've got examples for each of these. So we've got 4 corners. I mentioned this one earlier today. So you as a teacher would ask a question with 4 possible answers. You could label the 4 corners of your room with the answer choices A, B, C, and D. You could use chart paper, just a little piece of computer paper if it's got a bold enough letter or number on it. Maybe the choices are 1, 2, 3, or 4. However you want to do this. And then students would vote with their feet. They would get up and move to the corner that they feel has the right answer. You would want them at that point not to just stand there, but to discuss with a partner or with their small group of why they selected the answer that they did. I think these types of 4 corner movements are especially powerful when all 4 answers are valid. And it's just like a variety of opinions, and they're having to really hone in on what do I believe. The example, though, that I have shared here on the screen now is using test item sample from the TIS document from the assessment page, the test item specification document that has sample questions for the OSTP and grades 3 through 8. And this one comes from the grade 8 document. So we would read the sentence, and then students would decide which of those 4 answer choices they believe is the right answer. This would be a way to do some test review for you to have a quick little assessment to see kind of where students are at and hear their reasoning why they chose the right or the wrong answer for a multiple choice question. And then you would just reset. You'd have students come back into the middle of the room or go back to their desk before you would do the next one of these. Debate walls. You pose a question to the class. Maybe it's about interpreting a character, a theme, maybe just a novel in general. It could be the pro or con of an issue in an argument unit. Maybe it's an anticipation guide response. Those anticipation guides, I would sometimes use those at the onset of a literature unit that had those big questions framed around various themes and big ideas, and students had to rate things on a scale or agree or disagree with different statements. But you could do this with movement. So students would vote with their feet, choosing one wall or the other. Really, instead of 4 corners, this one is 2 walls. But the way it would work is students discuss their rationale with someone from their own wall on why I voted the way I did. And then students, if it's an even distribution, or maybe it'd have to be odd numbered groups, but then students have to find a partner from the opposing wall and explain why they voted differently. And then at that point, if you wanted to, you could have students re-vote with their feet. Maybe some people would be swayed. Here's an example to make it real. This is a sophomore play I used to teach, an old Greek play. In the play Antigone, the most tragic figure is Creon or Antigone. And then students would vote, discuss, and then compare rationales with people who voted differently than they did. So that's the debate wall. I also have, in addition to these slides to share with you all, I have a 1-pager handout of all these movement activities quickly summarized for your use and reference for the upcoming school year. Thumb scale, this is very little movement. It's a tiny bit of movement, but asking a question using the thumb scale, voting up or down or sideways if they're unsure. You could also have students stand up if they agree, or sit down if they disagree, or hover if they're unsure. And then again, trying to get that discussion in. Students looking around the room, finding someone with the same answer, moving to them, and then discussing. So here's one of those anticipation guide examples based on the novel The Giver, with this statement: sometimes it is okay to lie. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you unsure? Now look around the room, see who voted the same way you did, and then move to them and discuss. And then there's the brain boost, the mini break, just during the transition in the middle of a lesson, giving students a 1 to 2 minute break to stand up and move around. If you wanted to, you can play some music that they would enjoy moving to. So that was a whole lot. Let's stop for now before I share even more activities with you all. The ones we just looked at, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the handout that has everything. Ooh, that is not what I wanted to click. Described. Do any of those resonate with you, or do you feel you would want to do them, or you've done them before? So the handout is now in the chat for you all to quickly reference. So the 4 corners, debate walls, and thumb scale are all defined for you there. One of you mentioned using 4 corners already. When you use 4 corners, how did you use it?
When I've used it, I've done it like at the beginning of the year, getting to know my students. But that would be helpful for test review.
Okay.
And that way they can go around and discuss why they said that answer, so they can hear other people's viewpoints. I did like the debate wall. That would be good with my argumentative writing unit. So
Okay,
I
great.
can do that before we start, just so they can generate ideas and get different viewpoints. So I haven't seen that one before, so that would be good for me to use.
Great. Any thoughts from Jennifer?
Over pretty well with my students. So I think that one looks like one I'm definitely wanting to try. I would enjoy the wallflowers activity that we talked about earlier as well.
Okay, great. Excellent. We are ready for the final push here because it's the sum prep required. Takes a little more work. And the gallery walk, which we mentioned at the start of our time together today. In the gallery walk, you post different artifacts. Might be photographs, comics, poems, maybe it's thesis statements, maybe it's discussion prompts, but they are hanging up on chart paper around the room or maybe out in the hallway. And then students rotate as they read or view and respond in their notebooks, or maybe on a guided note page, or maybe with a conversation group that they are with. And this is basically a grown-up version of stations, which students probably had in middle school. And then a amped up version of a gallery walk is called post-it posters. So students are rotating between all of these different artifacts, which are taped on chart paper or hung up around the room. But then they're all given a stack of post-it notes that they then respond to the artifact with. So the artifact is in the middle of the chart paper, and then students put their post-it notes, their thoughts, comments, questions, responses all the way around it. And then students can even respond to one another's responses by sticking a post-it note on someone else's beneath, so it becomes a long chain. So that would be post-it posters. But I know chart paper can be expensive, so you got to beg your principal to have some. Mark it up. This is when you display an open-ended prompt on your screen, if you've got one of those, or your projector, and then students write their answers on your marker board or chalkboard. Students always seem to like using those expo markers. And then you could add a challenge by requiring students to have different answers, so it's better to have that open-ended prompt. Where a variety of responses would be warranted. And then students would take their seats again, and then you as the teacher would lead a discussion on the different responses that are on the board. You would have to really trust your students to do this activity. Also, I only recently learned this. Storing your expo markers on the tray, like so, horizontal, that's fine. If you were to ever store them upright, that's not great for the marker juice. It's actually best to store them, and I don't have my Ooh, I've got my green screen on. So it's best to store them upside down where the cap is facing down. That way all the marker juice goes to where you're writing from. So that's just a bonus piece of info from me to you. And then there is the chart check-in. This is the most complicated one, I think, but this is when you as a teacher provide some sort of chart on the board, be it a bar chart or a pie chart or the Cartesian plane example that I gave at the very beginning. And then each of the parts of the chart that would be important to know would have the labels of what it is students are figuring out. And then students place their answer on the chart as they arrive in class. So they could mark their answer with a marker or write their name to indicate their response. One teacher who did this even made little magnets with students' faces on their magnet. Now I can imagine those becoming stolen quite quickly or destroyed quite quickly. But the example that I saw, and I'm sorry I don't have it in the slideshow, it was a vocabulary check-in, and it was like, how are you feeling today? And it was the Cartesian plane, XY axis. So there were 4 different vocabulary words and a positive and negative on the X and Y axis. And so students were placing themselves all over the board. So this takes a lot more thinking. I feel like it'd be hard to pull off, but I wanted to give it to you as an example of like, okay, like maybe once in 9 weeks I could get with the math teacher and figure out some sort of interesting chart that then we could add movement to somehow in ELA. Before we move on, any thoughts, comments on those some prep required movement activities, gallery walk, post-it posters, mark it up, and then the chart check-in? Any questions on those or thoughts on how you might use those? Thoughts, comments, questions?
I like the idea of using that with vocabulary words,
Okay.
especially just trying to, increase vocabulary words beyond basics. I think I could use that.
Okay. I mean, I'm even thinking with if you wanted to do vocabulary, do it with the chart format, a bar chart where you give them 3 or 4 choices along the bar chart, and then they just like fill in a line or two with color based on which way they're feeling that day, if it's feeling words or I don't know what, but I could see that being somewhat easy to pull off that way. All right, we'll move on. We're almost done. PowerPoint. Sharing again, full screen. So, based on everything that we have learned thus far, I'm going to challenge you all to think about where could I add movement in one of my lessons. So, using everything we've learned, I'd like you to consider adding one of the movement techniques we learned today, or maybe one you realize, oh, I had that one in my back pocket. I want to try that again. And add it to a specific lesson around one of the objectives from the Oklahoma Academic Standards for English Language Arts. And so I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, we've had some thinking time, and so now we're going to have an opportunity for Lindsay and Jennifer to share out their thoughts on which movement activity they're thinking of for sure adding next school year, this upcoming school year, and to maybe which standard or objective that would be in. So, Lindsay, you want to go first?
Yeah, that's fine. So on the debate wall, that would be good for my argumentative unit. The kids have wanted to do a debate, and I think this would be a good kind of structure way to do that. The discussion train, I was thinking my students have a hard time with like pre-writing and generating ideas. So maybe the discussion train would be a good way to get various ideas from their peers before they start writing. And then on the mark it up, I'm still trying to think of how I could do that, but maybe have the students do parts of speech or grammar or collaborative writing where they're coming up and writing a sentence.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Jennifer.
So I had completely forgotten about Four Corners, and I have not done that in forever. But hearing about it again, I feel like one of the biggest uses that I thought about is sometimes when we're reading, we come across some figurative language that which type of figurative language it is feels pretty ambiguous. So I could, have the Four Corners set up to be like, is it, onomatopoeia? Is it a metaphor? I could have them set up as the four different corners, and then the kids could go to those corners and discuss which one they think it is. And then we could kind of analyze, what is it about that particular piece of figurative language that makes it, fit into multiple categories. So I felt like that would really help with discussion. That was the one that came the best to my mind outside of the drama ones, which really work well with a lot of what I do.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. I hope you all find some ways to incorporate movement in your classes in the upcoming year. We have just a few final slides and we'll wrap up. So it really is about shifting our mindset to finding more ways to add movement to our classes. I think you'll find it is easier than maybe you're thinking and than you thought initially. That if you're just a little more intentional, you'll find ways to incorporate movement in your classes. So you have that handout. I put the link to that in the chat for you already. And I think we've already done our reflection on this today. I want to give some thanks, some shout outs. Molly Babineau gave this a version of this presentation that inspired me to develop one for Oklahoma back in Denver at the National Council of Teachers of English, their annual convention. She teaches at the Colorado Academy in Denver. So it was with her permission that I adapted some of her slides for our use today. And she and I both based some of these ideas on an episode of Jennifer Gonzalez's Cult of Pedagogy. If you don't visit her website or subscribe to her podcast, check her out. She's got lots of great ideas. And then some of these ideas come right here from Oklahoma, the K-20 Center, which is based out of the University of Oklahoma. Their activity cards have so many great ideas connected to movement. So your ticket out the door today is a presentation evaluation. It's going to ask you to identify who your presenter was today. Please choose me, Jason Stevenson. The location or the event, it's not Standards on the Move. You can just say webinar for the location. And for the name of this session, if you put movement, that'll be enough for me to know what you're talking about. So I'm going to drop the link to the evaluation form in our chat. I'm also going to stop recording.